back to Cosmetics Anonymous. I am your favorite baby mama, Bougie Vintage, and today's video is a story time. This story time is a little bit more intimate, a little bit more personal, and I've actually been wanting to share this for a long time. It might be scattered and all over the place because there's not really an order of operations, but I wanted to talk about my experience growing up basically sheltered because I don't know, I think that a lot of kids that do grow up sheltered definitely end up being a little bit on the rebellious side, and I am definitely guilty of that. And so I just want to share my experience and kind of just talk about what led me to do certain things, I guess. I'll start by saying that I grew up in a Christian family, very strict. And not only were we Christian, but we went to church on the seventh day because that's just what we believe. The seventh day being Saturday. But do not get that confused because I was not Adventist. I don't really know the difference between just going to church on Saturday and being a Seventh-day Adventist. A lot of people think that I'm Seventh-day Adventist, SDA, whatever that is, but I am not. I never was. I think Seventh-day Adventists are a little bit more strict than just Seventh Day. I don't really know what rules and regulations go on in that part of the world, but I wasn't with all of them shenanigans, okay? So we were never Adventists. I just wanted to make that clear. Not only was I just so blessed to be grown up in a Christian home with two strict parents, but also my father was a pastor, or is a pastor. I use this term pastor real lightly, and if you don't know why, it's because of my deadbeat dad story time. You can go check that out. There's two of them. That's neither here nor there. So on top of growing up in a Christian home, we didn't just go to church on Saturday and that was it. Every day was a Christian day. Every day was holier than thou. Like every day, and I was just a kid at the time, but like it still affects you. By this I mean that as a family we would have devotion, we would have Bible study, we were only allowed to watch certain shows, we were banned from watching certain shows, and we were only allowed to listen to gospel music. Child, if the radio was on and some Aaliyah song was playing and we knew the words, child, we might get in trouble for singing along. Like there was no secular music allowed until my mom got fed up because she was tired of listening to gospel music every day of the week, and she just kind of rebelled first, and that's where I get my rebelliousness from. Hey mom. And she started buying secular albums and, you know, allowing us to listen to all of the music of the world because music is such a powerful thing. And I love music to this day. Like I can't live without it. I would die if there was no music. That's one of the main things. Like we were only allowed to listen to gospel and we just weren't allowed to do stuff. When I say my parents were super strict, especially my dad, and because it was a Christian household and my father was a pastor and my mom was his first lady kinda, she was trying to let him lead and be the man of the house, but because of the financial situation that didn't last too long, child, and he wasn't able to be an actual man of the house. Like he spews out this man of God thing, and you know, he orders us around and tells us to do this, that, and the third, but he wasn't actually a provider, which is a big deal in the Bible, that the man should provide. And so I still have that old school mentality where I feel that way, that my man has to provide for me, otherwise it ain't gonna work out. It was just a really negative environment, even though it's supposed to be positive and filled with light, because, you know, it was supposed to be just, we were supposed to be like this perfect godly family, and it just wasn't working out like that. When I say that my father was super strict and my mom had to just follow in his footsteps, we weren't allowed to wear nail polish, not nude colors. Like the only nail polish we were allowed to have was clear. We weren't allowed to have our ears pierced. We weren't allowed to have our noses pierced, child. I lived with my mom and dad up until I was 9 years old. So all this is happening from the time I'm born till I'm 9 years old. And my sisters are all older than me, and they lived in the house as well. None of us were allowed to do anything. We weren't allowed to wear makeup. We weren't allowed to have anything on our lips but lip gloss or Vaseline, child. Lip gloss was even pushing it. Like, we just weren't allowed to do stuff. And so obviously, once my parents separated and my mom took me and my 2 other sisters, because everybody else was old enough to be on their own, she took me and my 2 other sisters and moved us to Scarborough. That's when things started to change and we started to kind of come into our own, and that's when the beginning of my rebelliousness started. So before I get into us moving out and being like, you know, just with my mom, when we were still in the house, I talked about this, I think, in my Debbie Dad story time, how cheap my father was. And I know that has nothing to do with him being super strict, but like, you know, now that I'm having a child and now that I'm having my own family, it would kill me if Shooter were to be anything like my dad, because if my little daughter wants to go to the ice cream truck and she goes and she asks her dad for money and he gives her fucking $4 and tells her to get whatever she wants, and then he has the nerve to say and bring me back my change, I would be livid. Like, I would be so upset, because that's what my father used to do. He used to give us $2 and tell us to bring back his change. How do we bring back change from the ice cream truck? Like, what are you gonna do with it? Like, why can't we just keep it and put it in our piggy bank or something, or like keep it and use it when we go out some, because you know kids like to have money. Like, the other day I was in Staples and a little girl wanted to buy gum and she had the $2 to buy it, but her mom wouldn't let her, which is completely different though. But my point is that the little girl had her own money and she wanted to spend it on the gum, so I'm assuming she either gets an allowance or she just had the $2 from one of her parents, and she wanted to be able to feel that sense of independence because they see their parents spending money, you know what I mean? And so that was something that always bothered me as a kid, that my father would always say, bring back my change. And so it would actually pain me if Shooter ever gave my I will beat his ass. Do not give my kid money and tell her to bring you back change. If you're giving her a $20 bill, obviously you're gonna say bring me back my change. But if you give your kid $5, you don't need to tell them to bring back your change. Like, that's just ridiculous. Let them keep it. Unless you is in hard times, dying, like unless you're broke and you need your change back, then I understand. But like, my father did not need the change back. Whatever. Because we were Sabbath keepers, or because we went to church on the Sabbath, every Friday night by a certain time, like before the sunset, we weren't allowed to do anything in the house. Like the TVs would have to be off. You know, we weren't allowed to cook. You weren't it was like being Amish for the night. You weren't allowed to use any electronics in the house. We would just be one as a family, which is okay. It's okay to have family time, but we were always having family time. We had a big family. There was 5 girls and my mom and my father. And also we always used to have certain people in our house. And so our house was always a full house. And so on Friday nights, we weren't allowed to do anything that wasn't natural. So watching TV is not natural because it requires electricity, you know? So the lights would be dimmed and we would have to order food, which was the best part of Friday nights. Every Friday night, we would order junk food and we would just eat it as a family. And I, being the little baby, was always the first one in the damn, whether it's the KFC bag or the pizza box, I was always the first one in that bag. There's so many pictures of me as a child dipping into the bag and nobody else is at the table. That's how strict my household was. Like, no electricity on Friday nights, okay? Anyway, by the time my parents were like going through their super roller coaster and just turbulence galore, I was over the situation and I had no problem with my parents separating. I was ecstatic the day my mom told me we were moving and my father was not coming, girl. I said, yes, hunty, let's go, okay? Because you know, as a kid, maybe subconsciously I thought this meant like freedom, but in my head, I was just like, I was just over the whole entire situation and I didn't want to be around him. I never ever cared to be around him, and like even when I was little, I just could never stand my father, and that's just the weirdest thing ever. Like, people love their dads, like, but for some reason when I was little, I just could see through him. You know, kids are like a little, you know, so I just never liked him. Of course we'd have fun times together, but like I just never really took to him completely. I just knew something in me just didn't gravitate towards him the way I gravitated towards my mom. When my mom decided that she was finally gonna up and leave because there was just so much drama, I was happy and I was ecstatic, but my other sister was not. We both had our rebellious stages, but she's 3 years older than me, and she rebelled it completely different than I rebelled. We rebelled at different ages as well. I find that my sister started rebelling really early, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we were so sheltered and we weren't allowed to do certain things. And then once we just lived with my mother, and my mom's working full time, like, my sister kind of just wasn't under any watch or proper guidance, and she wasn't able to do certain things because, you know, my mom wasn't there to be able to prevent certain things. I'm like, certain things, but like, seriously, like, no, seriously, my mom, she was trying her best to provide for us and, you know, have us ready for school in the morning and do all those things as a single mother does. If you have a single mom, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's hard for her, or it's hard for your mom to get all those things done, but she manages to do it because that's all she can do. I guess my sister realized that that was the case, and so she would start to do bad things, and she would get away with it. And no matter how much my mom talked to her or disciplined her, it just wasn't working. And my sister has a really soft spot for my father. And so because of that, she took the divorce and the separation a lot differently than I took it. Like, girl, when I tell you guys, it didn't affect me emotionally. I think it affected me as an adult, but when I was a kid, it didn't affect me because I was ecstatic, I was happy, and I knew in my heart that that needed to happen. I knew that my parents needed to get divorced. It didn't bother me that they were getting a divorce. It didn't bother me that we were living in separate homes. It didn't bother me that I wasn't going to see my father because he drove me crazy. And so this is me at 9, like me at 9, okay? My sister being 12, she's in her preteens, she's getting titties, like she's being a bad 12-year-old. And then as she got to high school, it just got worse and worse and worse. And so this is not about her. Like, I'm not going to be on here talking about my sister because she's probably going to cuss me out anyway. But I think that divorce and being sheltered definitely affects every child in a different way. And so now that I'm becoming a mother and Shooter's becoming a father, I think that I have to take certain things from my parents' marriage, and Shooter has to take certain things from his parents' relationship, and we have to both work together to make sure that our kid doesn't go through those things. And I think that's really, really important, and that's probably why I'm sharing this now, because I'm just in mommy mode. Like I said, the divorce was not affecting me negatively when I was young. I would actually get upset because for a while my mom was allowing my father to come into the house, and he would be there for hours because he's whatless and doesn't, excuse me, and wasn't working. He would be there for hours, and he would basically take ownership. Like, he would sit on the couch just like he used to do at the other house. And my mom at first was letting him come around because she thought that he was going to try to be a man and reconcile and, you know, do those things that he was supposed to do as a man, especially as a man of God. But he wasn't, and so she finally put her foot down and said, "You're not allowed back over here. You need to go." And then I was happy once again, because there was one day that I came home from school and my father had read my diary and he was trying to discipline me. But I was pissed because 1, he didn't live at the house. 2, I felt so violated. And 3, why the hell are you reading my diary? And why were you snooping around the house to find it to begin with? Like, you know what I mean? So I was so upset, and I don't remember getting in trouble from my mom. I remember he was just trying to discipline me, and he was trying to involve my mom, but my mom wasn't really having any parts because my mom keeps a journal herself. She knows what it's like to be violated that way, and so she didn't really discipline me about it. She kind of just nodded with him, and then once he left, that was basically that. But I was bawling my eyes out. I was so upset and hurt that he went and read my diary. Like, you're weird. So yeah, so once my mom was like ixnay on the dad yay, like, he wasn't allowed to come around. And once I got older and got to like high school, that is when I kind of started to rebel. In the 9th grade, I wasn't rebelling at all. I was very focused. I was very in the books, you know. I was like on the honor roll, like I was a really good student, and I didn't care for PA days. I hated missing school. I was a nerd, like I was just a nerd. But once I got to grade 10 and I started liking boys, and like, you know, I started liking my jeans a little too tight, and I just started to come into myself, and my period had started when I was 12 years old, but like once I became a hormonal teenager, that's kind of where things went downhill, and that's when I kind of started to rebel, and that's when my mother and I started to kind of butt heads, because at this point it was just me and her, and my other sister was gone at this point. It was just me and my mom, and you know, we started to have a really rocky relationship, and my mom was still trying to shelter me. Like she wasn't sheltering me like how we were sheltered before. Like at this point I could wear nail polish. She took us to get our ears pierced at like 10, when I was 10, and I think it was kind of like she was giving us an inch and I was taking a mile. And so because my dad was so far out of the picture at this point, and there was only one parent to deal with, I just thought I was grown, I guess. That's basically why my mother and I started butting heads, and she was trying to shelter me even though she couldn't, because she could not. One, she was tired because my other sister tired her out, and she says this all the time. She's like, honestly, you're so lucky because your sister made me so tired to the point where I couldn't even discipline you at that point. Like, she just couldn't discipline me. Like, she just couldn't. Like, by the time I was 16, it was a wrap, you know? She didn't have the energy for it. And she understood that times changed, and that she was gonna have to adapt to those changes. Like I said, once I hit high school and I was in grade 10, that's when I really started to be a little bit of a rebel. And I was good until the summer of grade 10. Okay, that's when I was first talking to the guy that I really liked, and I went away to Quebec for the student exchange program, and I was working there, and I was making a lot of money for a 16-year-old. And because I was away from home, I decided, and I found out that you could get piercings and stuff by like age 14 to 15 in Quebec. I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go get my nose pierced. And that was kind of like the first real rebel moment I had. I got my nose pierced, and I told that story. I done hacked my mom's email like I was doing the most. It was because for the longest time, I asked for a nose ring, and I still don't see a big deal with it, because I think from like I was like 12, I was asking to get my nose pierced because all the little Indian girls in my school had nose rings, and I was just like, Mom, I'm Indian too, like why can't I get my nose pierced? She's like, you're not that kind of Indian. And so she was just like, yeah, no, like you're not getting your nose pierced. She really put her foot down, and she really didn't want me to get my nose pierced, and because she kept telling me no, by the time I got to 16, I just felt, and I had my own money, I was just like, fuck it, I'm gonna just do it my damn self. And I did. And when you're 16, you're not grown, and when your parents tell you something, you should be listening to them. But I was not listening because I just felt like I was my own woman. I've always been extremely independent. Even as a baby, I was really independent, and so that's why I decided that I would be making grown woman decisions, and I went to get my nose pierced, and it backfired. I got in big trouble. It got infected anyway. Like, I had a big bubble on there for the longest time, and then it finally healed. But like, I think it actually permanently messed up my sinuses. I think they pierced through a nerve that affects that, and so because of that, I have really bad allergies now, but that's whatever. So that's my karma, I guess. It's not like I got a tattoo though, and that was my whole thing too. I was arguing with her, and I'm just like, it's not like I got a tattoo, like it's just a piercing. It can come out anytime I want, and she's trying to tell me that's beyond the point. So even though I knew I wasn't supposed to do it, I still did it. And then a couple months later into the school year, so after summer, we get into the school year, I decided that I wanted to get my belly button pierced, and I knew I would have to hide this from my mother because I was not allowed to do that either. Like, the nose ring was already enough. I was supposed to take the nose ring out when I got back to Toronto, and I did not take it out. Well, I took it out anytime I was around her, and then I would pop it back in so that it wouldn't close on me. And so that was me doing things that I wasn't supposed to do. And my entire my entire life from high school till like 2000 and whatever, like honestly it was just me doing shit I was not supposed to do. Like I've always just been a rebel in every aspect of the word, and in every aspect of my life I've been rebellious. Whether it comes to my personal life or whether it comes to employment, I've been a rebel, and you guys see that in my story times when it comes to that. A couple months later I went and I got my belly button pierced, and of course I was hiding it from my mom, and I thought that that would be an easier piercing to hide just because it's under my shirt. Like my mom doesn't really see me naked, so you know she's not gonna see my piercing and I'm good to go, and it looks so cute and I was in love with it. But of course karma again, it rejected because I guess my belly button just didn't like it, so, or my skin didn't like it, so it was rejecting it. And I got my belly button pierced I think twice. The first time it rejected and let it heal, and then I went and got it pierced a second time and it rejected again. And so I was like, if I pierce it the third time, I'm just not gonna have a belly button, so I didn't pierce it. And now there's like a permanent scar above my belly button and it's really ugly, and I regret piercing my belly button because of this. And if I had listened to my mama, I would probably have a cute belly button still. But it is what it is. It's just like, that's like a scar for me that is like lesson learned. You know, I'm gonna show my daughter and be like, this is what happened because I didn't listen to my mom, okay? So don't listen to me if you want to, but you're gonna have to pay for it some way or another. That was the whole belly button situation. And oh, she found out about my belly button because one day I was wearing a top that was sheer, and I was sitting in her office. I went to her office after work, after school, and I was sitting in her office and I was leaned back on the chair like this, and I was talking to her, and I guess she just happened to look down, and the light from her ceiling was reflecting off of the diamonds in the belly button ring, and it was freaking beaming through the shirt like a fucking Care Bear. And so she saw it and she's like, did you pierce your navel? And I was just like, and then she just like, ugh. And she didn't say anything about it, and that was that. Like, I knew then that she was really tired of me. I really knew then that she was tired of me. The rebelliousness didn't end there. I continued to get piercings, and then I was getting tattoos. And growing up in that Christian environment, I knew that those things were not okay. But then I saw my sisters getting tattoos and nobody's really saying anything to them about it. And so I've always loved art. I do art. So tattoos for me were very much self-expression. But I always say that now I kind of battle with whether or not I want to continue to ink, whether or not I'm going to finish this half sleeve, and I just don't find tattoos necessary at this point. I would love to finish my sleeve, but at the same time I'm really, I don't know, I just battle with it a little bit. Because I was seeing my sisters with tats, I felt like it was okay that I get a tattoo. And it's not like I went at 16 to get my first tattoo. Like, no, I went at I think 18 was my first tattoo, and it was this one, and this was really meaningful to me. All my tattoos are, but like this was my first tattoo and it was really meaningful, and I don't regret this tattoo. So of course within the time between 16 and 18, of course a lot of shit went down in terms of me being rebellious. I obviously lost my virginity. I was having frequent encounters with my ex-boyfriend. I was lying about my whereabouts, and that was something I never really used to do. I always used to say it was really important for me to always tell my mom where I'm gonna be, but I think my mom had gone on vacation twice, and so because I was home alone, I can't believe she trusted to have me home alone. She had my sisters like call and check up on me, but like I was literally home alone at 16 or 17 when she went on vacay. I was using those times to do things that I shouldn't be doing. And I really feel as though if my mom or father had sat us down and just really spoke to us and, you know, enlightened us a little bit about life and gave us the birds and the bees and, you know, did all that stuff with us, I feel like I wouldn't have made certain decisions that I made in my life just because my parents were open, but because they were so shut and so sheltered and like certain things just were not conversations in our house. I feel like that's a part of the reason why I ended up being such a little rebel. So if they had just spoken to us and were open with us, we might not have all been so rebellious. Because I remember one of my sisters, she left home early because she couldn't deal with my father, because she just wanted to do her own thing too. And all of us, and we're all girls, we all have something rebellious about us. And I didn't even talk about me getting into freaking being a pothead. Like, that was a big part of my life. Like, weed was my life at one point, and my mom would never ever go for that, like, ever in life. I had to really be sneaking, smoking ganja, and like, I just didn't have respect. Like, you know, I feared my mom, and I think that's important to fear your parent, but I don't think I feared her enough. I feared her to a certain extent, but then I started to feel like I was a woman too, and so that's actually why we kept getting into it, to the point where she got so tired of me, she's like, you got to go. Being rebellious doesn't get you anywhere but kicked out, girl, and that's basically what happened to me. And it took me a long time, okay, a long time to get it together. From the time I got kicked out until the time I finally put my foot down and like realized that I am the problem, I have to do something to change. I went and I lived in the shelter, blah, 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 and I know you guys want that story time, and I'll give that to you, whatever. But it took me really long to figure out what I need to do differently to change my life, to change what happens in my life, or to not change it, but like have some sort of effect and some sort of say in what happens in my life. Because everything that was happening was not fun for me. Like, cool, I was a rebel, but then there's this consequences you have to pay when you do certain things. And so I think I was really reckless when I was younger. I'm glad that even though it took me a while, I still figured it out early enough to where I'm good. Because there's a lot of people that don't get to figure it out in that time. There's people that are like 27, 28, 30, and they're only now seeing, or sometimes they don't even end up seeing, what the issue is and how they can fix it before their life spirals out of control. I would hate to have gotten pregnant at a young age and had a kid and not know what to do with it. I would hate for my life to have gone in that direction. I'm glad that I went through the experiences I went through because I got to learn, but I just feel like I didn't have to go through half of the shit that I went through, because most of it is just because I was not listening and I was not being a good kid. I'm just doing my own thing, and like everything that's happened in my life has taken, or everything that I've chosen to do that wasn't necessarily a good decision, it had a consequence. Like when it came to me smoking, that had a consequence, to the point where I was like, okay, I'm done with weed. Like, you know what I mean? Same goes for like overindulging or getting intoxicated and like drinking too much and vomiting my brains out. Like, that stuff's not fun and it doesn't feel good. And so I just feel like I'm glad that I got it figured out before 25, because if I was still, like, there's people that are at 25 and they're still kind of living that life. And of course your 20s are for having fun and stuff, but I've been growing since the womb, bitch. Like, I've been growing since the womb, and I just personally feel like you don't have to have life figured out by 25, but you definitely need to have a sense of maturity by 25. And I'm glad that I definitely got that. And so if you didn't grow up sheltered, that it can be a blessing and a curse, but at the same time, I appreciate the fact that I was sheltered to an extent, because I could be way worse, because there's some people that are not sheltered enough and they do become young moms and have multiple baby daddies and this, that, and the third, and I'm just glad that that's not the life I live. Not saying that that's the worst life ever, like, no, there's obviously always a light at the end of the tunnel, but I'm just saying, like, I'm glad that I had strict parents, even though when you're living in it, you don't feel that way. And I know there's a lot of my subscribers that do have strict parents that don't want to hear it. Like, they're just not here for anything. There's no conversation. You can't talk to them. But for me, I can appreciate it now as an adult. I still feel that if they were a little bit more open, my life would have went in a different direction than it did. But I feel like when I was in that, I couldn't speak to my parents. I felt like they weren't understanding. I felt that they were just old grumpy people and they just were not hearing us out as kids. and everything was their way or no way, and we just had to respect them and do what they said, and we just couldn't have input, and we weren't allowed to have an opinion about anything. And so I think it just gave me what I need to raise my kids properly, or raise my kids the way I want to raise them. I'm definitely going to, enforce some of that parenting into my kid's life, but not to the extent, like, I feel like I was sheltered to an extreme. If they were trying to make me wear skirts every day of the week, I would have a freaking issue, because there used to be a girl in my elementary school, and she always used to wear skirts, and I always used to feel so bad for her, because we would be playing freaking soccer baseball, and homegirl's wearing a long denim skirt and she can't play. Like, it just wasn't fair, and I'm glad that it wasn't to that extreme, but to me it was still pretty extreme. Like, we weren't even allowed to wear pants to church on Saturday. Like, we had to wear a freaking skirt. It had to be past the knee. We had to have doilies on our heads. Like, well, my older sisters, I didn't. I was a little kid, but like, they had to wear doilies on their head. Like, it was really, really strict and uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to live like that. But like I said, I'll definitely enforce some of those things into my children's lives, but not to the point where my kids feel like they can't come to me and talk to me about anything, because I didn't feel like I could talk to my parents about anything. I didn't feel like I could talk to my mom about anything. I still don't feel that way, but like, I could talk to her about a lot of stuff, you know what I mean, now. But when I was growing up, I couldn't talk to her about anything because she didn't hear me. Like, she was angry for a lot of different reasons, but like, she was frustrated, but she just wasn't hearing me. She wasn't seeing my side ever, and everything was her. And of course, she felt like everything was me. But like, I was a kid, and I needed for her to not only be my mom, but to be a comfort, to be a friend in certain times, and she wasn't always that for me. But as I got older and she got older, we kind of developed a friendship, and so now we're like super close, but we weren't before. And so with my father, y'all already know that ain't the tea, okay? That is not the case with my dad. It's completely different. Like, we don't speak. We've never spoken. We haven't spoken since my grandmother's funeral, and that was a hi and bye thing. Mainly him saying hi and mainly him saying bye, because I was not really responding. A lot of you guys asked me if my father will be a part of my child's life and if he's reached out to me. The answer is no, and the answer is no. Absolutely not. There is no salvaging that relationship. I will let God deal with him accordingly. God will deal with me accordingly too. But at the end of the day, the answer is just no. So, if you are a parent and you are strict, please just hear your kids out, man, because you don't want them to end up like me, telling stories on YouTube about how they been ditching cabs, bitch. You don't want your kids to end up like me, okay? But yeah, that's basically it. I love you all, and I'll definitely see you in the next one.